Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of drumming up support. Fun little pun to include the word drum in the theme title because we are looking at drums this week, particularly and hopefully interesting drum work. Maybe not necessarily a drum focus, but interesting drum patterns in music, something beyond your typical metronomic playing. Today we're going to be looking at a group that has consistently impressed me in the past, Snarky Puppy. We're going to be looking at the song What About Me in with the subtitle We Like It Here. Let's dive in, see what Snarky Puppy is bringing to the table today. Right off the bat, a really interesting 4/4 groove. We got something funky here as we've slipped into something more rhythmically comfortable. Yeah. Layering up those impactful notes. Cool. So that last wild riff was also still in 4/4. Just so funky time-wise. Yeah, very expressive drum work. Also, that last fill was effortless. I love that little bass lick. Bit of a driving rock here, especially with those 16-note bass kicks. There's cool layered stuff underneath in the bass, the piano, the guitar, underneath all the brass. What are those hi-hat hits? The precision on the hi-hat though. That's fun. I'll tell you, a long time ago, I lost track of one. I ain't found it yet. I know that face. You just look at your buddy and you're like, oh, dang, this is going to be good. Oh! Very slick way to bring this back, too. Oh, I think We Like It Here isn't a subtitle. I think that's the name of the show. Yeah, it's the name of the album. Alright. I mean, this is what I expect from Snarky Puppy, but, like, also, it's not what I expect from Snarky Puppy, and that's exciting. Like, alright, let's start with the beginning of the song, right? We kick it off with some really interesting drum rhythms. Like I said, the opening of the track is in 4/4. It is 4 bars of 4/4, so we are looking at a pretty standard 16-beat phrase. Nothing out of the ordinary there. But the rhythmic pulsings of all of it were rather obtuse, and I couldn't tell you what that pulse was. It was more complex than a typical, alternating, 9 and 7 to create 16 or something like that. It was definitely broken up into a lot of smaller chunks. But yeah, I mean, you count it out, 16 beats from the beginning of it to the end of it, where the repetition would start. So that's pretty cool. Like, all right, they're getting playful. This is what I think. Snarky Puppy is definitely your musicians, your favorite bands in a sense, where I think they definitely do have a general audience in their fandom, but I think a lot of it is people who are musicians in some sort who get to come in and listen to people really playing at the top of their craft. And so, like I said, it's what I expect. When I put on a Snarky Puppy song, I'm expecting to be blown away somehow, some way. And right off the bat, they've already grabbed me. This is a very cool polyrhythmic idea. Might even be polymetric. That just lines up after 16 beats. I'm not sure. Again, it was too dense, too complex for me to pick up on a first time, and we never revisited that section. I think I had two chances to figure it out, and then we were into the A section, I think, which is the main part where the horns came in. We start to get a little bit of a core melody here. The bass and guitars are playing something alongside. We get some stacking going on here. This is pretty cool. This is what Snarky Puppy does really well, is they create a framework, expand upon it, and then go wild and return to that framework in a new light. They kind of take the traditional jazz structure of A, which is your hook, your main lick. Maybe it's the part where the vocalist sings the main vocals, especially if it's like a big band group. That's your A section. And then your B section is solos, however long that takes. Maybe you have one soloist, maybe you have 15. That's your B section. And then you return back to the A. But what they do is they allow their B section, their solos, to bleed into a return to some core ideas of the A using the energy that they've built from the B. It's a reimagining, sort of merging their core lick with the intensity of their solos. It's quite impressive. Now, granted, I've only listened to 3 songs from Snarky Puppy, so maybe I've just listened to the ones that follow this format. Maybe this isn't what they typically do, and I think all of them came from the We Like It Here album also. So maybe this is more of an era of Snarky Puppy than anything else. But yeah, it's very cool to see this evolution of the song into that final moment. And right here, we're getting the core idea. We're building it up. We introduce the first set of horns. Was that the trumpets, I think? No, that doesn't sound right. I don't remember what the first set was. They give us a little bit of movement, and then the next time through, we bring in more instruments. I think this is where the trumpets came in, and then more instruments on top of that, and then we kick it into the proper A section. This is where the hook comes in. It's where the most memorable melody is. And this section brings all of the intensity down a little bit as far as complexity. What we're looking at here is basically layered, harmonized ideas with a couple of moving concepts underneath. We have the drum pattern, the guitar and bass both have their own lines. The bass is doing a bit more of a walking bass line, although with a more melodic flair to it. It's a little bit more engaged than that, less as a foundational idea and more as a complementary idea. The guitar is giving us some rhythmic vamping and some lead melody, kind of bouncing back and forth between these two. The keyboard's kind of all over the place. It's a little ornamental, a little foundational. Everybody's kind of jumping around a lot now that I vocalize and say all this stuff. And I wonder if that's something I would pick up on in other tracks too. I don't think I've ever talked about this before. There really are no roles here. We don't have the foundational instruments, the lead melody instruments, the rhythm instruments. Everybody sort of jumps around and fills in whatever role they want seemingly from phrase to phrase. You might be rhythmic in this 4-bar idea, but in this 4-bar idea, you're ornamental or you're harmonic or something totally different. It's really interesting to hear. It makes the A section feel quite dynamic, as it's not as rigid or static as traditional jazz tends to be. We go through this a couple of times, though. It's, like I said, less complex than the opening. Even paying attention to the drums primarily because it is a drum focus week, the drums kind of leaned way back into more of a metronomic style. We had a heavy focus on the beat itself, a little bit of syncopation and playfulness, some fills in there, but for the most part, they were part of the rhythm section, not standing out as anything, but being more of a foundational role, dictating the pace and feel of the song. And everybody else kind of follows suit, and part of that I think is just because there's so many instruments playing at this time that you can't have everyone going crazy. So you put a lot of simple ideas together to create something more complex. You put a lot of complex ideas together, and now you also have the difficulty of making all those ideas work well together. It's easy to layer simpler ideas. And this was quite enjoyable, but it's not really why I come to Snarky Puppy. Yeah, I like the fact that they can put some memorable licks in there. I like the big sound that they can create, but it's always the B and the outro that pull me into their music. The A is more of a setup. It's to lay the groundwork for everything else to be built on. So it's not bad in any way. It's just, like I said, it's what's necessary. It's the stage setting, right? It can still be cool on its own, but it's going to be there to support the bombastic parts, the parts that your jaw drops and you're like, that's what I got to see again. You know, most people don't come back to films for that first act. It's the second and third, the rising tension and the finale, that's going to be most memorable. You kind of need that first act to make everything else work, but after you've seen something a million times, sometimes you don't. And while this is only a 7-minute song, I don't think I would ever skip the first A section. So the metaphor kind of falls apart a little bit. Again, it's not really what I'm coming for. It's the foundation to everything that comes after. And so that does bring us to the B section. And this kind of, it's not a solo section in the traditional way. We have heard some Snarky Puppy songs with improvised solo work on it, and maybe there is some improvised lines in here, but for the most part, there's a lot of pre-written, pre-composed ideas going on. For instance, the drums kick us off here, and I felt that they were interesting, very melodic, kind of moving away from groove and exploring something more pitch-based, where each part of the drum kit is a different note, for instance. And but nothing too crazy happens yet. There's some fun rhythmic stuff going on, introducing polyrhythms, but it's very light. And then the guitar comes in on top of it. And the drums continue to play something semi-exploratory. It is loop-based, but it sits underneath the guitar that constantly starts on a high note and just brings it down. And we hear this falling, this descent in the guitars over and over and over. And from here, the song goes in a very interesting direction. Because next, the bass comes in. A second guitar comes in, maybe. Maybe the keyboard takes up what the guitar was doing, and then the guitar takes a new line. Anyways, we have some wild rhythmic ideas and very big wall of sound, sort of noise. There is a rhyme, a reason to everything that's going on, but a lot of what it feels like to me is texture building. It feels like they're creating an atmosphere more than using the notes to create melody and harmony. And there's another genre of music that does this with this exact same group of instruments. It's post-rock. This is somewhere I never expected Snarky Puppy to go, and I think it's why I had more comments during the intro and A section, and once this kicked in, I was very silent, because, one, I was just along for the ride. There's not a lot in here I can talk about. It's a lot of intricate texture layering, and using specific notes to create feelings of chords, not chord progressions, but a single chord that sort of morphs over time. I mean, I guess technically that is a progression, but it's not, it doesn't feel like playing this chord, then this chord, then this chord. It feels like this chord over time somehow becomes this one by replacing single notes at a time. There is a chordal movement here, but it's not your typical way of creating a progression. And the more I listened to it, I was just like, this is post-rock. It gets loud, it gets very large. It's a wall of sound, of texture. Not really focusing on melody or harmony, but just on an atmosphere and building that. The drums are still kind of syncopated in here. There's some fun rhythmic ideas, but other than that, this is just straight up post-rock. That just kind of blew my mind. Again, not what I would expect from them, but they pull it off so well. And of course, after this is probably why this song was selected for the week, or requested, I should say, suggested. Because this wall of sound atmosphere dies down and we get an extended drum solo here. And this is just gnarly. Granted, the keyboard comes in about halfway through, and I don't know how much of this is pre-composed or not. It feels like it fits very well, but the keyboard is also not doing a lot. Kind of just holds some notes out, which creates an atmosphere alongside what the drums are doing. But the drummer, man, what I love about it is for the first time in the song, the drummer decides to put a backbeat down. It's quiet compared to everything else, especially as they grow in volume, but he's using the hi-hat pedal to play quarter notes. Very nice. It keeps that core beat in the back, which is, like I said, it's nice because he's going in all sorts of rhythmic directions here. He has, and well, see, it's two things, right? One is it gives you this beat. So no matter what crazy thing the drummer decides to do, and the drummer goes in some wild directions, you still have that beat. You can kind of follow along with it. You never really get lost if you're just wanting to nod your head to it. It's there. But the other thing is that it's actually super important to the playing. because there's so many moments in here where he shifts to these bizarre polyrhythms, maybe even polymeter. Again, there's too much going on. It's tough for me to figure out if any of these clashing rhythmic ideas cross bar lines. But yeah, it's the way that it's syncopated against this backbeat. And while maybe a trained musician would be able to have this backbeat stuck in their back of their mind and hear the syncopations against that, I think your average listener is going to need both of them present, at least the first few times listening to a song. And so he presents both of them. You can very clearly hear how he's modulating, modifying, and playing against that original beat, the core pulse and tempo of the song. And I think that's phenomenal. Just all the different ways he goes about doing it. He slows it down, he speeds it up. I think there's even a second layer of polymeter. At one time, he's just hitting the crash cymbal in these wild polymetric syncopated hits. But other times, he's also bringing in some of the toms. And I think he's playing a third rhythm over there, too, against the hi-hat, against what he's doing on the cymbals. And it's just, how do people's brains work like this? For all your limbs to be on just these different tempos, man, it's bonkers. Anytime this kind of stuff comes up, I feel like I say the same thing, but it blows my mind. These people they're very different in the way that they understand rhythm. I think their minds are just on another level as far as that topic's concerned. They just feel it differently, and I think it's always going to blow me away. This is one of the things that I've talked about in the past, is me being a pitched instrument player. As I went into composition, I found I was really good, almost had a natural leaning towards writing melody and harmony, but when it came to rhythmic parts, when I had to write, orchestral things for school or whatever, snare, timpani. Timpani is a little easier because if you do have 4 pitches there, it can do melodic things. But like writing snare parts, writing drum kit parts for rock songs, it doesn't come as naturally to me. And I think it's interesting seeing the inversion of somebody who plays drums or percussion and seeing them write for melodic instruments. That's always interesting too, because you get very rhythmically focused parts for flutes and trumpets and stuff, or guitars even. And it's like a very different way of viewing music. And so drums are always just going to fascinate me, especially people who can play them well and can manipulate time the way that this guy does. It's mind-blowing. It really is. And of course, like I said, this takes us to the outro, which brings everything together. We bring back the horns, we bring back those layered harmonies, but now this feels more post-rocky. The drums are still playing these interesting ideas underneath everything, but the really big sound that the guitars were going for is now amplified by the horns. We have this large harmony now on top of and within the texture layering they had created, while bringing back some of those memorable licks from the A section. It's a wonderful way of bringing everything together and really putting not a period at the end of this, but an exclamation point at the end of the song to just say, this is what we did. It was exciting. Let's wrap it up. And just phenomenal. Absolutely fun. Like I said, every time I've listened to Snarky Puppy, I've just walked away trying to pull my jaw off the floor because somebody has blown my mind. Sometimes it's a group effort, sometimes it's a single focus. Here I think it's a little of both. The drummer, absolutely the star of this track, but also the entire ending feels great and is connected to everything previous to it, which is something that I think jazz kind of has problems with at times, where your solo sections can go kind of wherever they want. And I like this sort of controlled improvisation, where it isn't just about this is your moment to express yourself, but this is your moment to, in the moment, push the song in a unique direction for this performance. We all know where it's going to end up. It's just your job to craft that journey on the fly. And it feels quite a bit different from the way jazz traditionally handles solos. which can be a bit hit or miss, especially compared with how they interact with the A section. I feel like solo sections can sometimes feel a bit disjointed, as if the A section is just something to do so that your musicians can solo. Um, and I'll be honest, there's a few performances I've been there just for the solo section. Like the A's were fine. I was, okay, but I want to hear what this guy has to say tonight. And no, there's no segmenting here. Everything works together. Everything is designed to benefit the entire song. And I love this. It brings a jazzy vibe into a modern focus and integrates it with a very modern sound, rock, and even in a sense, prog rock slash post rock, kind of bringing both of those realms together and creating something that I think is rather unique and very modern and captures, I think, the best of all of it. There's some proggy ideas in here, but nothing that I think is too avant-garde. There's the post-rock, but we don't take a lot of time to grow into the big sections. We just kind of focus on atmosphere building and get there quickly, and the pacing of the song might even be a little too quick for post-rock fans, but I find it to be really great. And there's enough jazzy elements and improvisation here to, I think, represent jazz as a whole without really falling into the trappings that I think non-jazz fans might find with jazz music. Normally at this point, we would have some sort of thematic conversation, what the song is trying to say, but I don't know. This is just a great track for me to listen to. The atmosphere kind of changes over time. It's never one specific thing, being that it's a bit more complex. I don't really have a strong read on it. It's not like it's clearly a sad song or clearly a happy song. It's very moody. I think that would be the best, quite vague description I have of it. But it's also very powerful at times, and the solo is it's mesmerizing. And all of this doesn't really fit together into a simple narrative. I think this is one of those songs that one would take multiple listens to really understand what you as a listener is going to get out of it. I doubt Snarky Puppy would ever give some sort of authorial intent, and honestly, there's a small part of me that just thinks all of this is fun. Not really designed to tell any story, but someone comes up with a lick. Hey, that's pretty good, but if I added this to it? And someone else is like, oh, dude, that's great. And the drum's like, oh, I got a beat for this now. And they just kind of build it, not trying to say anything, but just having fun playing music with each other. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that either. So, those are my thoughts. Snarky Puppies, what about me? What do you think of this song, though? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own thoughts, opinions, or perspective on this track. Let me know down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.